So you spearheaded a initial hamstrings injury management. Sounds like you had a lot of ambitious clientele going out for some high level sprinting.
Yeah.
Resulted in some
Well,
resulted in some extra business for
one
you.
of them was a sprinter. Two of them were out of shape people that thought they would try to run.
So you got you
uh,
you got hit hard with the hamstring.
yeah, dude, three in like a day and a half.
Listen, that's to our benefit because now we get insights into initial hamstring management.
It's true. It's true. Yeah, so the one that I wrote about on the in the article was he's a sprinter, so he's like I don't know how old he would be. I don't know, like late 20s, I would say. Um yeah, I mean all the details are documented in the article, but I think one of the things that we've had some feedback on is just the initial management of, so like how do you do the iso ramping? How do you do the positional isometrics? So I wanted to kind of just talk my way through that just so that people had an idea of kind of what we were doing. I mean, I did describe it in the article, but I suppose a video probably would do it some justice. So again, getting back to all of the info that's in the article, one of the things that I think is important to note on the initial management is um, oftentimes the nervous system becomes involved in the initial components of the injury. So there are going to be a lot of times where, you know, guarding of the nervous system, spasm within the nervous system, you know, protective tightness of the nervous system is going to impede, you know, our ability to get into the tissue and make the changes that ultimately we want to make as we progress through the program. So, you know, within the concept of our neural net, you know, one of the things that we discussed in the article was trying to access the neural net to down regulate those components of the nervous system. And so I talked about some local effects of what happens as a result of that and some global effects of what happens as a result of that. And so that's all documented in the article. I don't necessarily have to go through that here, but ideally what we're trying to do with those two strategies is we are trying to target the nervous system. So I know we kind of talk a lot about like, you know, CNS and biology, and when people think injury, just again because we've written about it a lot, you know, ultimately we want to try and go and improve the biological quality of the tissue. But as I said, in these initial cases, you can't even access the biological system to make any of the changes that you want to make. So we have to kind of engage the neural net through inputs that will sort of target the nervous system. And we want to create outputs of the nervous system, but not in a way that are going to create more, you know, volatility through the system, whereby it continues to guard and protect. So in that case, in this initial management, we use a lot of ISO ramping strategies. So that's kind of what I used. And so we described what ISO ramping is in the article for those that are still maybe a little unfamiliar with it. It's really just manual biofeedback with the intent of trying to allow the athlete to engage the tissue in a very, I guess, high effort way from an output perspective. They're generating what might be a very high output effort to try to contract the hamstring, but it's done in a very static position. There's no movement. There's no other factor that we have to that we have to worry about because we've controlled for them all, whereby we're going to create threat within the CNS. So one of the things that I use, or one of the strategies within ISO ramping that I use on that initial management is if you think about ISO ramping or manual biofeedback, if this is the tissue, ultimately what we're doing is we're putting a pressure force in the tissue, so in the muscle in this case, and then we're trying to create an attentional focus within the athlete or the client to say, hey, do you feel this pressure? Okay. And obviously this pressure we start, nowhere near where the actual site of injury and or pain is. So in this case, the injury was proximal medial hamstring. So I started, mid belly of the medial hamstring. So I was a few inches away from where the injury was. So what I'm doing is I'm trying to put some downward force into the tissue. I'm making sure that the athlete can feel the downward force. The leg is, so we're in a prone position. The knee is bent, so just passively resting. So there's no like holding of the hamstring. There's none of that. It's all in a relaxed state. And what we're doing is we're pushing down, and what I'm trying to cue the athlete to do is whatever pressure they feel in the hamstring in this case, or in the muscle, use a similar amount of effort to generate a contraction whereby you would feel like my pressure would be pushed out of the tissue. Okay. And this is the way that we actually gauge the effort on iso ramping. So obviously, I start with very, very low force. So I'm pushing in just a little bit. I'm saying, okay, now you use an effort equivalent to actually push me back out. Okay. As they get better at it, and as we start to engage that neurological output and we engage the network a little bit, I'll start to push deeper into the tissue. So I'll put more pressure down into the tissue, and now they have to use more force or generate a higher output using more effort to push me out of the tissue. And so what I spent a lot of time doing on those on that initial visit and subsequent visit was just a lot of iso ramping all the way through the medial hamstring, now working up towards where the site of injury would be, working down and through the lateral hamstring, just trying to create an equivalence of output in all areas of the hamstring. So we're doing a couple of things here. We're creating that focus whereby the athlete can only use that tissue to generate the output, and we're starting to create that stimulation to the neural network, whereby now we're starting to highlight some of the nodes in the network that, for the most part, if we don't use strategies like this and we tend to just maybe immobilize, or we tend to just allow time to allow for pain to come down, well, the longer that we spend in that situation, the dimmer those nodes start to become. And so then it just becomes a little bit, requires a little bit more later on down the road to try to get them to light up again. So iso ramping is a very easy strategy that I use, that you use in these cases to try to engage the neural network.